Resolution 18-1361, expressing the commitment of the St. Paul City Council to protect the children and grandchildren of this community from the risk of climate destruction.
And could I invite the members of iMatter to come join us at the podium? I don't have a plaque or a staff report. I know that you guys have some words you'd like to share about this resolution, so if you can come on up. I think some of my colleagues have heard me mentioning in the past few weeks the term climate inheritance, which is a term that I had not heard before I met with iMatter, and I think that it's a great word, and it's a great reminder to us of like what the decisions we make now and how they impact the future. So welcome, welcome.
Thank you. My name is Julianne Burr, and I live at 4015 Orleans Lane North in Plymouth, and graduated from Avalon School this year. We are here today as part of an organization called iMatter Youth Climate Action Program, representing communities across St. Paul. Various iMatter groups from all over the metro area, including Minneapolis, Minnetonka, Eden Prairie, and many more, have come together to fight for climate action. We were brought together from 4 different schools by Leah Tang from Avalon School.
My name is Archer Gallivan. I live at 870 Tuscarora Avenue, and I'm a recent graduate of Highland Park Senior High. While this resolution is composed of deadlines and figures, we cannot lose track of the very tangible reality that lies on the other end of our generation's most pressing issue, that being climate change. As a proud St. Paulite, a very superficial ultimatum at stake is the fate of the Mississippi River. For my peers and I, it feels like the theme of our adult years might be uncertainty. And in this case, I'm just not quite sure that the magnificent backdrop to my childhood will be quite the same for kids in decades to come. Our land and natural resources should take precedence over any financial roadblocks that may stand in the way of preserving the safety, essence, and livability of our city.
Hi, my name is Beria Hauken. I live at 168 6th Street East, and I go to Central High School. I joined iMatter because here in Minnesota, it can be easy to ignore the effects of climate change, but there are people all over the world that don't have that same privilege. You may not know all the people that are suffering the effects of climate change, and you may not see them, but that doesn't mean that they're not real. So I think it's time for St. Paul to step up, recognize, and rectify our contribution to climate change.
Working from the largest contributors to greenhouse gas emissions in the United States, iMatter developed a report card based on the areas a city can impact and that data that is generally publicly available. An A through F grading system evaluates a city's action or inaction to reduce greenhouse gas emissions to levels needed to end the climate crisis. St. Paul's renewable energy is an A+, carbon removal is a B, waste is a C-, zero emissions plan is a D-, and youth involvement is half a grade. Overall, the grade is a C+, which is an average grade. We would like to thank you for the work that you've done to help St. Paul during the climate crisis. And our resolution aims to keep improving these grades to ensure a healthy future for the citizens of St. Paul.
Hi, my name is Jackson Kerr, and I live at 1539 Maywood Street in St. Paul. And I also recently graduated from Como Park Senior High School. And I have also always deemed myself a progressive. And I think we all can attest to the role this caring city has played in nurturing its youth to grow into compassionate citizens of the earth. It is from this lens that we approach the writing of the Climate Inheritance Resolution that is now before you. We have established for the city the goals of net zero greenhouse gas emissions in its buildings by 2030 and overall by 2050, 100% renewable electricity use by 2030, with 25% of that electricity generated within city limits, the completion of the climate action plan within a reasonable time frame, and the formal engagement of youth and communities of color in the climate planning process. Being a progressive, my first inclination was to read this resolution as a bold, crusading agenda against climate change. But having read it multiple times over now, it is apparent to me that this resolution cannot be characterized as bold, monumental, or even progressive. It is, in fact, something much more profound. Getting St. Paul to net zero emissions is only monumental insofar as it's essential for building safe and healthy communities in the city. Transitioning to 100% renewable electricity is only bold because there's no other alternative where St. Paulites can continue to thrive and live with dignity. Formally engaging youth and communities of color in the process isn't so much progressive as it is the right thing to do. In short, your commitment to this resolution isn't simply another progressive choice. Committing to this resolution is instead an absolute necessity if St. Paul is going to fulfill its promise of being the most livable city in America.
Hi, my name is Stella Healy. I attend Avalon High School and I live at 916 Margaret Street. I have lived my entire life in Dayton's Bluff, and I've always been proud of the city that I live in. So much so that when I was in the 4th grade, I bought myself a poster of St. Paul in 1874. Even then, I could tell that it was St. Paul. And the reason was because of the river, because of the islands, the curvatures of the land, and the bluffs. And I'm not saying that our topography hasn't changed since 1874, but I am saying is that it's what makes St. Paul St. Paul. We're not in this alone. Next to us stands not only those at iMatter, but the hundreds of students across the city who have signed petitions. Organizations like Minnesota 350 and Environment Minnesota, and communities like District 1 and the Eastside Freedom Library. I'd also like to say thank you to Chief Resilience Officer Russ Stark and Council President Bren Moen for their support and cooperation in getting us here today. We thank all of you, audience and council, for your dedication and time to this cause. As youth, we are directly affected. And by doing what we're doing today and standing before you, we want to make sure that the earth stays a central part of our city for 144 more years. Not only for the benefit of our children and grandchildren, but for the benefit of our city as well. Thank you.
Thank you. And I appreciate you having you here very much. I do want to acknowledge Mr. Stark. When we initially sat down with Mr. Stark, and this is kind of the boring part of this, but his read was, we want to be pushed, and we want to be pushed by the youth in our community, but we also don't want to commit to things that are absolutely impossible, so we fail. And I really admired his willingness to sit down and figure out what is pushing and kind of go a little further than that, and also put together a resolution that is something that, it's a document that we can honor, and not something that just ends up dusty on a shelf that we passed. And so I think it's a meaningful document that really pushes us as city building owners and the other stakeholders in the city of St. Paul to reach improved, to strive for our climate goal changes in a much more quick manner than maybe we had planned. So I appreciate that. Are there other thoughts? Ms. Henningsen?
Yes, just want to echo the thanks for being here and your work. I did want to follow up, and maybe it's supposed to be, and it's an internal thing, but is there a youth climate report card that we're supposed to have? I know you referenced it in your remarks, but if we could have a copy of that, I would appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could hand those out later and print them out as well if you'd like copies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is a half a grade like not even an F? Or, yeah, that was bad. Other thoughts? Okay, so we do need to move the version 2 in Legistar. It has a small correction, making clear what is a city property as opposed to a privately owned property. So I would move version 2 if there's no further discussion. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The resolution is adopted as amended.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
What are we doing?
Item number 14, final adoption of ordinance 18-30, amending Chapter 64 of the Legislative Code pertaining to signs.
Ms. Henningsen?
I am going to move a 1-week layover on this item, and next week we intend to separate out the White Bear and soccer items from the downtown piece so that we can move the soccer and White Bear forward and figure out the details on the downtown stuff.
And I'm going to speak in support of that layover because I do feel like we've had, it's been challenging to separate our issues and make sure that we're not, that we're moving forward with things we want to move forward with without unintended consequences. Ms. Naker?
You said it.
Oh, sure. All right, there's a 1-week layover by Ms. Henningsen. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion prevails.
5 in favor, no one opposed. The ordinance is laid over to August 22nd. Item number 15, second reading of ordinance 18-43, granting the application of the Salvation Army to rezone the property at 618, 626 Lawson Avenue East from RT1 two-family residential to B2 community business, and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map. This ordinance is laid over to September 5th for third reading, public hearing. Item number 16, second reading of ordinance 18-45, first reading, of ordinance 18-45, granting the application of the City of St. Paul to rezone property at 2239 Como Avenue from T1 traditional neighborhood to RT2 townhouse residential and amending Chapter 60 of the Legislative Code pertaining to the zoning map. This ordinance is laid over to August 22nd for second reading. Item number 17, resolution